we'll just hold on here for a couple of minutes and give Michelle a chance to get here from the far north.
Michelle emailed me to let you know she would not be here and needed you to chair today.
Oh, she did?
She did.
She didn't tell
I was busy
me.
talking to other people.
I'm sorry? Was I talking to myself again? Okay. All right. Let's do some introductions. Jim Moore, at large, and temporarily the chair, I guess, today.
Sharon Brown. I represent the city of Fountain.
Jessica McMullen, your Policy and Communications here at PPACG.
Tom Fifely, City of Colorado Springs.
Juliet, League of Women Voters.
Hal Moffett, El Paso County.
Aubrey Day, at large.
Ellen Hussey, Teller County.
Ann Ash, Green Mountain Falls.
Janelle Linder, El Paso County. Last meeting.
You don't have your microphone on.
Last meeting.
This is your.
There you go.
I do not approve.
Get out of here.
No, I definitely don't.
Okay. Oh, and I just saw coming in the door, the indelible Courtney Stone is on her way in. Okay, consent items. Agenda, does anybody have anything to call out on that? I do have a correction for the minutes under item 4D. We did not recall Jim Godfrey to serve on the nominating committee.
Jim's very disappointed.
I know, I was expecting a call from him, and he's sorry he missed the meetings. Okay, so that was me, that it should be. Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda
With that change.
with that change.
So moved.
Hal Moffett.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any comment? All in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Okay, first up, under item 3 is a brief introduction.
So we are very lucky to have Kate Hatton from the Peak Military Care Network joining us today. Take it away, Kate.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Most of you are new faces to me. I actually used to work here at PPACG under the Fort Carson Regional Growth Plan. The Peak Military Care Network was a program that came out of the Fort Carson Regional Growth Plan. So Jim asked me to come back and kind of give you an update. I tried to do that to the board, and I apologize that I haven't been back in a while. So anyway, I just wanted to give you a quick overview of where we are after all this time. So not to go back to the beginning of time, but the Peak Military Care Network came out of a collaborative effort to really look at the needs of the family side of the equation as we looked at the growth plan, needs around infrastructure, and how, as Fort Carson was doubling in size during that time, what that would look like for housing, transportation, utilities, schools, that sort of thing. We realized that everybody was pretty much having the same conversation around the need to support military families. And this is a community where there are lots of organizations that want to help and support military families, but 10 years ago, they weren't necessarily working together very well or talking too much together, and Sharon remembers those days. So PMCN came out of that effort to really make sure that service members, veterans, and families are connected to the highest quality resources in the community. Yes, sir. Good question. I don't know. It's a PDF. I didn't bring that. Or didn't. Oh, there you go. It's a little better. That's better.
Nice.
Okay. Cool. Thank you. Sometimes I'm not so technology. So our mission is to connect service members, veterans, and families to the highest quality services provided by our trusted community partners. PMCN serves as a collaborating entity. We work with multiple partners to try and connect the dots and make sure that the holistic needs of the military family are met. See if I can do this. Maybe you should just go down a page. I might go down a little bit. Is that still better? I don't know if you can see it all. We started with the Network of Care website, so we provide basically information and assistance, navigation or case management support, and education and outreach. The information assistance is web-based through the Network of Care website, which has more than 1,000 services listed in there in the community, military, VA, community resources, and really it's just about a matter of connecting people to ideally, hopefully, the services they need as quickly as possible. The great news is that there are 1,000 services in here, and the bad news is there are 1,000 services in here. It gets overwhelming. So we try and do a couple of different things. Actually, there's a button right here where people can connect to us online. If they can't find what they're looking for, they can just send us a quick little note. It comes to us via email, and our navigation team can help people figure out what they need. We also provide call-in assistance. We work with Pikes Peak United Way 211. So if people call in to 211 and they identify as military or veteran connected and their needs are complex, we can work with them and do a bigger assessment that you can really do on a quick 211 call to find out what the needs are, what the underlying needs are, really stick with individuals long-term, trying to address the initial critical need at first, the crisis need, which is often a financial need, can't pay rent, are having trouble putting food on the table, or those can't pay utility bill. And so we kind of, again, try and peel back the onion and find out the why of that, again, and work with all those partners who provide specific services, whether it's the County Veteran Service Office, benefit assistance, financial assistance, behavioral health, and the full 9 yards. And that's kind of that circle of really those holistic needs right there. And how they're all interconnected. And often, for people who call us, they have 2 to 3 different needs in minimum, and so it takes multiple partners to kind of fill those gaps. Again, that navigation support is critical because just giving a phone number and saying good luck, we were finding that people weren't connecting to those services. They were so overwhelmed, but when we could follow up with them, first of all, again, do that kind of triage and assessment to ideally find out the right resource, what they're eligible for, and make those connections, and then follow up to see if it worked, and if it didn't, why not? So we're making good referrals to start with, and then, again, working with them long term. So they find that it really is, what we find is they really see a big improvement in community supports, and that's a huge issue for feeling connected to the community, which is certainly a key quality of life factor. As I mentioned, we work with partner agencies. I know this is a little bit of an eye chart, but we have 45 as of this week. That's not on this slide yet. Prep Connect 360, which is a kind of employment-based program to help people figure out, veterans and spouses, what they want to be when they grow up after they get out of the military. And this, so again, really it's about multiple issues, broad range of services, breadth and depth of the network. What might be a good fit for one person in a behavioral health category or some other category or employment may not be for somebody else. So we want to make sure that we have expertise. And these are vetted partners that sign an MOU with us. They commit to collaborate and working together. If they don't provide the service, rather than say, we don't do that, good luck, they can say, we don't do that, but we know who does. Let's help you connect. Or again, they can connect back to our navigation team, which is 2 people, to really help connect the dots and make sure they find the right services. Yes, ma'am.
Kate, I have a question. What is Headstrong?
Headstrong Project, that's a behavioral health provider. They actually have some national offices. They partnered with UCCS's Veteran Trauma Clinic to provide behavioral health services, and it's sort of no questions asked, free behavioral health for families and veterans and families. And then if they have longer-term needs, try and connect them. So it's really about kind of the no strings attached.
Okay.
Let's get you help.
Thank you.
Sure. Sorry, yeah, the bottom part of what that is hard to read. So, again, I mentioned information and assistance, making sure people know and how to access services, the navigation or case management, and the education and outreach is another piece. We work with those partner agencies to make sure they understand military and veteran culture, understand what other resources are available in the community, and try and work together to identify trends. And so The goal is to make sure that those trainings are valuable and not waste people's time. So we ask them if it is, and they pretty much tell us, yes, the information's useful. And it's interesting over time, even military organizations, because it's not just the partner agencies who meet, and that list of 44 partners that I showed you are community partners. We work very well with the VA and our military installations as well. We don't ask them to sign our MOU because we figured they already understand military and veteran culture, but they said that they learned as much as anybody else, which is, again, that increase in military issues or veteran issues. And so we want to make sure that those trainings remain effective. This is a quick snapshot, and this is our 2017 impact numbers. We're still analyzing 2018 data because we're still in the middle of it. We ended the year with 41 partner agencies who provided more than 104,000 services. Those could be duplicated services. That might be someone who's a student at Pikes Peak Community College who has a child in CPCD's Head Start program, maybe seeking behavioral health from another partner agency. So those are, again, broad-based, sometimes duplicated services, but it's really about, again, the breadth and the depth of the services provided. We trained 338 partner agencies, and again, they said that the trainings will overwhelmingly help them support military and veteran needs. The direct support that PMCN provides, I mentioned that call-in, web-based assistance. We assisted last year a little over 1,200 service members, veterans, and families. We ask them after the initial call if the information increased their awareness of services. 89% yes. When we do a follow-up 30 days later, that number's like 99%. And they also said that 99% of them said that they had an increased opinion of community supports. Again, they walk in the door with a financial need primarily. That's something that's easier to ask for help for. And then we get into kind of some what of the other issues might be and how we help connect them to the different services. And the good news is that we definitely see improvements on the employment, the housing, and the financial support sides. Yes, ma'am.
Just curious, do you find under the 9% of assistance for benefits that there's a significant gap for the client walking in between their knowledge of the benefits available versus what's actually available to them?
Yes.
Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. And it's, because there's a lot of reasons for that. Again, getting out of the military is a very overwhelming experience, and oftentimes people are focused on getting the job that they need. Sometimes veterans say, you know what, I'm not really that hurt, or I didn't really have that much issue. I don't need to apply to the VA for benefits. There are more people who have a need greater than I do. And so there are a lot of different reasons why someone might not initially reach out to the VA. Or, they might have gotten bad information. Don't try the VA. And so there are a lot of different reasons, but we really, again, if it's just overwhelming, oftentimes we find that female veterans don't necessarily identify as veterans, or someone might say, I didn't serve in combat, so I don't consider myself a veteran. So we really try and make sure people have access to services. That also not just includes veterans benefits, but family members aren't necessarily eligible for the VA. So what resources do they have? We work with a lot of folks who have disabilities, and it might be an SSDI. Or some other benefit they might be eligible for that we want to make sure. Sometimes it's food stamps. We work with a lot of people who have very little income sometimes.
What is the type of financial assistance? Is it actual cash?
Directly.
Sure.
Sorry to interrupt, but we work with a lot of partners who provide assistance. We provide some as well, too. For example, we're a Project COPE agency, and that's a utility bill assistance program through Colorado Springs Utilities. The money doesn't go directly to the client. It goes to cover, it covers the bill. The Homefront Cares is an agency that provides a lot of financial assistance. Again, they pay that vendor, and it might be mortgage, it might be rent, it might be a car repair, utilities. Those are kind of the big ones we see. And oftentimes then there's things like, medical bills are a big issue too, and some people might work very hard to pay those medical bills, and then they get behind on rent or utilities and those sorts of things. So that's kind of, did that answer your question? Yes. Okay. Again, but then when we get in the door, one of the issues is, well, they've never applied for benefits. How do we help them get connected to benefits? The goal is not to give them a handout, but to make sure that they're self-sufficient long-term and to have a plan going forward. Okay, you have a part-time job, you need a full-time job. You're using your GI Bill and you thought your housing allowance was going to cover the cost of you and your family of 5. It's not. So how can we supplement that? I mean, it's people really do that a lot. And so, or they think that housing allowance will kind of, let them defer what the big boy, big girl decision on what I want to be when I grow up, and let's just kick the can down the road and go back to school and figure it out. But I can help pay for housing and some of those other things while I'm figuring that out. So, which isn't necessarily the best use of resources. One thing we are tracking right now is that, again, we served 1,200 last year directly. we hit that number in about mid-August this year. So we are seeing an increase. I think it's a combination of the needs continuing. The majority of units at Fort Carson are deployed right now. And so there are a lot of family needs as well, a lot of veterans. This is a very high growing veteran population, folks moving in here, as well as those who are transitioning out of the installations here. And also we're a little bit a victim of our own success in terms of getting the word out about who we are, and as we expand the network, people learn more about who we are and what we do. So that's kind of what we're seeing. This is the page down button, right? There we go. That's just a quick snapshot of who we are and what we do. Here are a couple of testimonials from some of the folks that we've helped out. Again, that help might be an active duty family that's moving here from South Korea and has never been to Colorado and wants to know what's up. A lot of questions we get from active duty families have to do with schools, and this is a very complicated community for schools with school choice and different programs. And if you find out in July that you're moving here and you've missed the choice enrollment open enrollment period for a school, how do you find it? Sometimes families scramble. It might be an active duty person who's got a mom or dad living there when we send them to the Area Agency on Aging all the time to help with caregiver support or other programs to get them connected to resources. So PPAC is definitely one of our partners, and we work directly with them in a lot of ways. Again, it might be a veteran who's struggling. It might be someone, again, who's just new to the community and doesn't know how to connect. And so we want to make sure we help do that. I think that was really the extent of it. We are new to Instagram, but that's growing rapidly. That's what the young kids like to use, I'm told, because I'm not one of them. So you can connect with us through social media or through pmcn.org, through that Network of Care website. And the goal is really just to make sure that through kind of that no wrong door approach, that people know how to access services and get the help they need. Ideally, we'd like people to reach out before they're in crisis. So if you have any, battle buddies or friends or neighbors or members of your congregation or whoever, coworkers that you think might benefit from connecting with us, please let them know. I'll stop there and see if you have any other questions.
Hi there. Do you have any programs where you pair up veterans with other veterans who are more familiar with the community?
We don't have a specific mentoring program. That's a great need. I mean, there are certain, the Veterans Trauma Court does that, and I think that's a great opportunity to do some. There are more networking opportunities, but we haven't developed a full-fledged, kind of mentoring program. But particularly as folks transition out, that's certainly a need that we should probably look into in more detail. Good question. Oh, sorry, you were too close.
I do just want to make sure provide support. The Independence Center has a Veteran in Charge program, and I hear about, you say PMCN, we call it Pumpkin, which seems really, really appropriate for today. Yeah, exactly. But just to say, they talk about, so we serve more than El Paso County with that program, and they talk about how much Pumpkin influences their capacity to provide really good quality services. Good. Because there is that one-stop shop and the network of resources that people can go to that doesn't exist in a lot of other spaces. So thank you for all the work that you're doing, because it really, truly does make a difference as far as people connecting to what they need.
I appreciate that, and that's really what we're trying to do, is make sure that everybody, ideally, I'd like to put us all out of business, because that people wouldn't be in crisis, but that there is a safety net here, and again, a broad network to provide community supports. Thank you for that feedback.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Kate, I've heard this pitch 2 or 3 times.
So, am I getting it better?
It always, it always impresses me, the success you've had as you spun off to be independent. This is the kind of thing, the initiative that we can do in PPACG that we often forget about, because we're looking at transportation and lift stations and things like that. So thank you very much for all the work that you do.
Thanks, I appreciate it. Thanks for the time, too. So I will close this down, and hopefully that doesn't mess up anybody else.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you, you bet. Thank you.
All right, we have a photo.
Yes, it's been a while since we've done a board photo, so I'm going to have Jenny take it over and kind of boss us around for just a minute so that we can all get a good board picture. Sorry, gang.
I wonder
need
which
this.
Blues brother was coming in to see us.
So if we could actually get over by the Pikes Peak sign, and then we'll move that, if you can move that flag kind of over this way, we'll have at least a few people sitting down.
I was just thinking.
Please, if you want to move over one, that'd be great. And we'll have
my costume. Our Wild West party.
Yes, every so often, roughly once a year, they decide to take our pictures. This is the second year edition.
If you want to sit down, we need one more seat right there. We'll kind of scoot everybody
That would be
in.
perfect. Why don't you sit there? I'll stand next to the lovely Julie, and life will be good.
And then if you kind of scoot in, and if you want to face this side and you want to face that side, that'd be great. Yeah. And then we kind of just. So if everybody will kind of on this side, kind of lean in this way. There you go. Perfect. Turn that way.
Go this way, I go this way, that's probably
Yep.
better.
And then you guys kind of tilt in this way just a little bit. So, yep. And then here.
This is good.
Yeah.
I like this.
Right?
Thank you.
You're welcome. And a powerful
After all that, you go out cell phone.
Yeah, where's the Nikon when you need it?
So 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. The big thing with phones can move. Thank you.
For the Canon. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Such good sport. Very.
Thank you all very much for using that.
Mr. Prather. Ken, you're it. Tag. Nick?
Item on the agenda is site application.
Good
Site
afternoon.
applications.
I'm Ken Prather, transportation planner, but today I'm here to talk about environmental stuff, which I guess is transportation related. It does move stuff. We've got two site applications. The first is the Bennett Hill Monastery, which has essentially a septic system, its own drinking water wells, and then its own septic system. And it was originally designed and permitted for 4,200 gallons per day. But as it turns out, they're producing usually less than 2 gallons per day. With the rules in Colorado, they do not need to have a permit from the state, from the Colorado Water Quality Control Division, so they are asking that they be D-rated, and they will come under the El Paso County Public Health Department for supervision, monitoring. So it's an administrative action. There's no construction. There's no work of any kind. It's strictly just a reclassification. The Allison Valley Development Company is proposing to build a lift station that will collect sewage from a new development that's between Baptist Road and Interquest Parkway on the east side of I-25, that will pump the sewage into a main line, a sewer main line that is connected to the city of Colorado Springs, and it will be operated by and become the property of the city of Colorado Springs. They go into their waste treatment system. So this is simply just a pump to lift it from the bottom of a hill, lift it up over the hill, where then gravity flows down to Colorado Springs. It connects it to an existing system. So that is a new facility, but it is pretty straightforward. If you have technical questions, I'm going to turn the time over to Kyle here, who is representing the entities for that site application. Otherwise, I'll be happy to answer any other questions.
Ken, I just have a question. Is it an enclosed facility, or is it, it's not like a treatment plant, that's open?
The lift station?
Yes.
No, it's completely enclosed.
So it's just a pump?
It's just a pump at the bottom of a pipe system that will lift sewage up and over into another enclosed, well, the whole thing is enclosed, but it lifts it over the hill where then gravity flow drains it. The typical issues with site applications are, with lift stations, are the pipes large enough? Is the storage facility in case there's a power outage? Is there some kind of tank retention system to catch it until the power can be restored? There are backup generators. How good are they? That type of thing. Who gets notified? They're not typically manned. There's nobody there to operate them. It's all automatic. So it's sensors and warnings and response times. Biggest danger is the power goes down.
What would be visible? I'm driving by on I-25. What am I?
You'll see a little concrete pump house.
A shed for the generator.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Everything's underground.
Hal?
I and Ann are a member of the Water Quality Management Committee, and Ann is a representative from CSC as well. We meet next Tuesday to go over these. There isn't anything in these that, from a water management or a quality issue viewpoint, represents any concerns whatsoever on standard practice. Looking at the engineering, from my experience, things look like they're designed well.
Okay.
That's all I have to add.
Thank you. Julie?
Just a question about the Bennett Hill Monastery one. It's an administrative action and no construction work being performed. What is the benefit to making the change? I just was curious why that is. Does it save money? Is it an easier permit?
I think they're tied to both of those. The state is considering changing a regulation, and I can't remember now, total organic nitrogen. Does that sound right? I don't know if you were there for that part of the conversation. Yeah. But they're considering changing some regulation along that line that could have an impact on the monastery. They meet all of the permit requirements that they have right now and all the standards that they're involved with. But it could be a money savings if the regulations are changed and they're under the county. They will still have to meet county rules, and depending on how they would not be under the state permitting system, so.
I think at least my understanding is that that's the primary benefit, and that the environmental groups that are involved agree with this. It ends up taking it from state management and state permitting to more local permitting. That ends up saving money. It just, there's less consulting engineering and things of that nature that go into that. But the actual rules and regulations that they have to meet are unchanged, is my understanding.
Good. Any other questions or comments? Okay, we're being asked to recommend the board approve the two site requests. Do we have a motion to that effect? Tim? Mr. O'Donnell? Okay. Second?
I'll second. Sharon Brown.
Okay, we have a motion, second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Got that. Now, don't go away.
Thank you, Tom.
Don't go away. Cost overruns.
Cost overruns. Last month, this item was on your agenda. If you remember, I asked that it be tabled the day before the deadline for submitting requests for money for cost overruns. The City of Colorado Springs canceled the project, put a lot more money on the table. Not everybody was aware of that. They asked that they be given another month to respond. So we did do that, and that's why I'm back before you today. There were no new projects submitted, so it's the original three projects were considered at last Thursday's At the last TAC meeting, the city of Colorado Springs reduced its request for its 30th Street project and recommended that the Manitou Springs project the request be fully honored. They asked that their Pikes Peak Greenway Trail be fully funded with the Transportation Alternatives Program, the TAP funds. And they reduced their request from 1.6 million to about half of that, and recommended that Manitou be fully funded. And then they would get about 0.8 million for their 30th Street project. That was the recommendation of the TAC. The couple of days after the TAC meeting, city learned that there were some environmental issues with the drainage ponds on their 30th Street project and some other cost issues that may cause that project to be changed again. And rather than coming through the CAC and to the board twice on the same project, they wanted to wait until they had everything lined up and could come through with a single request, which I imagine will be next month. So the tax recommendation that the Manitou Springs Park and Cannon Avenue Bridge restoration and the Pikes Peak Greenway Trail projects be fully funded. They also recommended that the other projects, the 30th Street project, receive
A little over a million, you got 1,024,000, I believe.
yeah.
That's on your
That's
background.
So it's the balance, but they don't want that request to go forward yet. So what was in your memo was the two projects that TAC has recommended. I'm not sure how to handle this. They asked that the third project not be forwarded beyond the TAC until they get the final cost identified. They may also cancel another project, which would free up more money. So probably the way to handle this is to recommend these two projects and not take action on the third project. Because I noticed in the memo, I did not even include in your attachments, I don't believe you got the 30th Street project, so it'd be unfair to ask you to make that recommendation, although I have it. I can pull it up if you care to see it.
Hal?
Am I correct that the issue that may impact the cost of the 30th Street project is going to be a huge decrease in the cost of that project?
Increase.
Number two, is that, and Ken, not to put this on you, but why does it cost $1.2 million to put in a mile of Greenway Trail? Do we know? That seems like a really high cost, considering we can pave a road for a mile for $1 million or something, whatever the number is.
It does, and I don't know. I was hoping the representative from Parks and Rec would be here.
Because that's, I mean,
For that.
original estimate was 500. It's more than 100% increase. It's 1.12 miles, and it's $1.2 million. That just is really, to me, that's a basic question. Not that it needs, the actual process we're going through is separate from that, but it just seems like a very expensive trail project. I don't know if there's a bridge in it that they have to build, or
Nothing they have.
is it?
Yes.
Okay.
There's several bridges, and they, sometimes when they were working on that trail, because I cycle that trail,
Okay.
frequently, because it's just, it's the best way.
Oh, it's beautiful.
It's the safest way to get from the north
Sure.
downtown.
It's a beautiful trail, it's just,
And but it's, because it's right next to, I think it's Minor Creek,
oh, yeah.
it is constantly.
Is that the area right there below, like the Costco and all of that?
Yes.
That specific
Yes,
area?
yes. Runs all the way downtown, and there's, I can think of one,
Because I've walked that. I walked
three,
that.
4 bridges that I know that are, and then you get downtown. But, you know, it's not, it also borders some private property, business properties and stuff like that. So I imagine there are costs associated with that as far as beefing up the sides of the trail because of the creek, just because.
Okay. Just an opinion, that's good.
Well, looks like the bids surprised people.
I will also add to that Parks and Rec.
Microphone, please. Microphone, please.
The sidewalk, if it's a paved sidewalk, Parks and Rec is using a more durable fiber reinforced sidewalk, and the base for the trail is actually a more durable base than we have on a lot of our roadways, because the trails are getting washed out every time we have a 50-year storm, and so there's a lot of channel mitigation sometimes involved in the trail construction, especially when it's adjacent to a creek in this city. So I think that would add to it. And we're actually finishing up Cottonwood Creek Trail connection up by Academy, and that is a very expensive trail, and we're only doing a mile of it as well. So I'm not surprised by this cost, as well as the accessibility requirements that need to be met, and the handrails, safety rails. Because a lot of that trail along Monument Creek, there's a steep drop-off, so this Parks and Rec are having to put in handrails. So they all do add up to the cost, so just to kind of answer your question.
Ann, go ahead.
Just speaking of trails, Fountain Creek has a trail up in Woodland Park, and it's falling apart. I walk on it every day, and people are trying to put rocks in, you know, because it's washing. And I just wonder who keeps up the trails after they're made. Is it government? Is it, how does that managed? Does anybody?
Mm-hmm. We have so many trails, and think about it, we have trees and saws, and
Yeah.
the maintenance of it is very difficult. So every time you're designing a trail or repairing a trail, you're always trying to design it for durability and ease of maintenance. All that adds up in cost, so.
Yeah, and it's hard to make it, it's not like paving a road, really, as Hal mentioned, because it's not flat, you know.
And that's where Parks and Rec is going down that path, is trying to construct it and prepping the soil underneath the trail, like you are a roadway, so that it does last a little bit.
I know the one in Woodland Park is having trouble, or it will eventually too, because of flooding. You know, it's just, they build the big berms and stuff, try to keep the creek in bounds.
Okay.
Well, I just wondered.
John, did you have a question?
Where are the bridges at that are going to be repaired?
I'm sorry?
The Park and Canyon Avenue bridges, where are they?
That's in Manitou Springs on, if you know where Cave of the Winds is, they're roughly west of that.
West of that, okay.
Down in the city, it's east of Manitou Avenue, or north of Manitou Avenue at that point, between Highway 24 and...
Between the roundabouts where it comes down there, that exit off of 24, where it comes down in where you go up Rexton, that way?
No, it would be further towards Colorado Springs.
Down farther?
Right.
Okay. It's not the bridge that you couldn't drive over because they paved too big a hump, right?
No.
I just wanted to make sure it wasn't that one. Okay. It is that one?
Yeah.
Is it?
Isn't there a contractor involved with that? Should we be paying for that? They build it so you can't even drive across it?
I
This is-
haven't seen the
Okay,
bridge.
but that's what this is here to
If you read the
remedy that?
cost overrun questionnaire, it reads like a report from federal bureaucracy on some major
Okay.
contracting. You know, the VA hospital was only 5 years and I don't know how many $1 billion over budget. So
Thank you. I was just curious if that was the same one.
Apparently,
Okay.
yes.
I guess it is.
Any other questions or comments?
Just a
Jen?
question. So we are voting on recommending these two projects only?
That's correct.
And the budget numbers that are associated with them are exactly what's on here?
I believe that's right, yes. Additional $656,000 and change for Manitou Springs project.
534,
And
842
Yep.
for the other.
And neither of these, or no, I'm sorry. It looks like it's STPBG funds are being recommended for the overrun in Manitou.
Right.
Okay, so that will leave some amount, they're saying in $1,024,000, $25,000, that was kind of earmarked for the 30th Street project, but we are not saying anything about that.
Not asking you to say anything about that today. That'll come back, I think, next month.
I look forward to that. Tim?
One more question. Is there any additional oversight on the Manitou Springs Bridge projects so that what happens before doesn't happen again?
Manitou Springs has changed a number of its personnel. We've got different people involved in the project, and CDOT is well aware of the issues with the project and are very interested in it. So, yes, I believe there is a higher degree of oversight.
Aubrey?
Yeah, so is it safe to assume that if the 30th Street project if they had all the numbers together right now, it would be competing with these bridges project for that funding? And so would it be not prudent of us to vote on that one yet and wait and let those two hash it out?
It reduced its request of funding and recommended that Manitou be fully funded, then it would take the remainder of the funds. So they would be satisfied with what's left in the STPG. And then 2 days later, they identified apparently some additional cost hikes, possibility of also coming forward and canceling another project which would return funds. And so we would have another cost overrun process that everybody would be competing for the funds. So then next month, they'll be back in competition, maybe not for the funds that TAC recommended last time, but any new funds that they bring to the table and might hope would go on 30th would be available to everybody else as well.
Okay. I guess maybe what I'm asking is, should we table this one more time and let all of them come at once, or is there the potential that we just keep pushing it off and pushing it off, and who knows what will happen?
Would prefer to move them forward so that these entities can get started and start getting this money obligated. Having money obligated by a certain date is a new world for us. In the past, there's always been a deadline that money would expire, be taken out of our area or out of Colorado. But CDOT covered us. And when we didn't move the project fast enough, they used our money, put it somewhere else where it could be used, and then put in some fresher money that kept our project alive longer. CDOT can no longer do that for us, and so we are now starting to face, get the money obligated or lose it off your project so that we don't lose it out of the Pikes Peak region. And it's new for everybody, so prefer to move it, keep things moving forward as much as possible.
Okay, so then one last question related to that. The CMAQ funds, are there any projects in the list that are eligible for those funds?
The City of Colorado Springs is looking at
They're working on
a
it.
project, but they weren't sure if they could obligate the funds and didn't want to ask for them.
Okay.
And then come back and say, no, we can't obligate them, and then make it too late for somebody else. So there's a couple of ideas floating around of how we can get that money.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? Yes, John?
If I understand it, the 30th Street Bridge project, they're willing to stick with their original commitment to use part of that funding to do this, and they'll look at some other project to be able to get that money from that will take care of whatever the new things they found. Is that what I hear you saying?
That's what it sounds like to me.
Yep, sounds like too.
Did you still want to make a comment?
No, I'm just, in case you needed to call a friend or use a lifeline.
Okay.
Ellen?
Just hopefully one supportive comment, hopefully it's information. None of these projects are happening in isolation. And in order to, by choosing to move forward with the, not only the Greenway Trail, but the Park and Canyon Avenue bridges, we allow the construction that's been disrupting what used to be called no man's land area between El Paso County, City of Colorado Springs, and Manitou Springs to wind up and restore some civility to transport and activity within that corridor or multiple corridors there in that very narrow area where people can actually move from one part of the community to the other. And it's sorely needed. So moving ahead in and of itself is one of the goals that entities have been talking about how to share the monies and streamline the process to make that happen indicates the importance, I think, to everyone in all three communities.
Would you like to make a motion?
I would love to make a motion that we approve
We recommend
2 and 3.
We
that
recommend to the board.
We recommend to the board that they approve it, attachments 2 and 3.
Do I have a second? I want John to vote. Any further questions or comments? Yes, Tamara?
I guess a question and a little bit of a concern. So the 30th Street, I think the issues there, you mentioned water quality pond that they're now going to have to, or a detention pond they're now going to have to construct. Is that, did I misunderstand that?
They've identified, the way it was phrased in the email, which I printed off and apparently didn't bring with me, was that they've identified their environmental clearance process has identified a potential issue with a drainage pond.
Yeah, okay.
That may cost them more money than their original estimate.
So right now, that street's all ripped apart, right? I mean, it's right now under construction, they're putting in drainage. And so how long is, I guess my concern is, so my guess is that $1.6 million is not going to cover the cost. So they're waiting, right, on asking for additional money. So is it anticipated that there will be available funds in the next few months so they can continue this project, or is 30th Street going to be ripped up for, forever or indefinite amount of time? So I guess I'm trying to understand what City of Colorado Springs and Manitou Springs and Parks and Rec have negotiated so that 30th Street is taking a step back so that the other two projects 2 and 3 get built. But I'm wondering what funding Colorado Springs is thinking is coming down the line to finish 30th Street.
If I'm,
It may be an issue of, if they can't get any of these federal funds to help pay for the cost overrun, they will have to pay for it out of city funds.
Okay. So they're,
yeah, we're going to hear this, I think, next month at the earliest.
okay.
I'm just
I'll
wondering how
make
long
sure
it
we
might
have
take.
a 30th Street project representative here.
Yeah, I think that would be nice if we had that.
But right now, I think what I'm seeing is the motion on the floor would actually recommend approval of all of the TAP money going to the Pikes Peak Greenway Trail and the $656,323 of the STPBG money to go to Manitou Springs. So, okay. Is there any further discussion or questions? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can you feel this process worked? You know, a few months ago, we were talking about how this process was going to work. Did it work? Like, we all hope that everyone, all the different entities got together and compromised and came together. Is this the a really good system that we all vetted out?
Yeah, we've had a substantial amount of money 2 times now, the very first time, and then this time, which is only, I think, the 3rd time. And in both times, an applicant changed its request, changed the amount of money it asked for, and played nice in the sandbox to share amongst everybody. It never got down to, well, my score is higher than your score, so you're out of luck. And of course, when we approved the cost overrun policy last year, I never anticipated that there would be projects that were being canceled. And now we've had one, and it looks like we might have another one because of the new obligation deadline, that all of a sudden projects are in the TIP, they're promised the money, they're programmed, but all of a sudden now they may not be able to obligate it by June of 2020, so they're saying, put the money back in the pool, let somebody else spend it that can do it.
Ken, did you introduce Catherine?
Do I?
Did you?
My boss would like to say something.
Mr. Chair, with your permission, just real quickly.
Oh, certainly.
This is Catherine Winger. She is with us now. She comes to us from Oklahoma City, and she will be taking over the TIP. If you remember, Kevin Reyes left us back in May. I'm not taking that personally, but I show up and like 2 weeks later he's gone. But anyway, she's going to be taking over. So over time, you'll continue to see Ken, but over time, they'll either be tag teaming or she'll be handling items in their entirety. So just wanted to make sure she was a friendly and familiar face, because you will be seeing her in the future. So.
And where does she come from?
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma City is where I last was, and I grew up in Colorado.
Oh, okay.
That's why we were able to steal her away.
We're glad to have you back.
Yes.
We'll look forward to working with you. Okay, next up is our Shepherd.
So, Jessica McMullen, your Policy and Communications Manager. You received a draft of the PPACG work program, and hopefully you all noticed the very obvious draft in it. And the reason for that is there have already been a lot of changes since what I sent you. The reason for that is our outstanding and wonderful executive director, not just saying it because he's there, pointed out that there were some places where we weren't calling out as clearly as we could what the 2019 work program was.
Exactly.
We were kind of generic, and we in many ways had a lot of focus in our text on 2018. And 2018 is not what we're doing in 2019, which was a really valuable discussion. All of the program managers actually met this Monday and talked about it. Started looking at ways that we can more cohesively and clearly line up what the 2019 goals are, what the work program, what you can measure us on, and how they align with the strategic plan. So I do want you to know that there have been some changes. If you have any spell check errors or missing periods or strange spaces, if you will just give those to me, I will happily incorporate those changes without needing to clutter up anyone's time. If you have, where would you guys like to start? Do you want to see what we're looking at?
Changes from the document that was sent.
Yes. So.
Yeah, and that was something, interestingly enough, as I was going through it, it wasn't entirely clear to me what the 2019 goals, objectives, changes. A lot of continuations. We'll continue to, do things gray, and we'll do green things, but we won't do blue ones.
Do you anticipate more changes?
We do. So part of this process for the work program is you see the draft, the board sees the draft, you guys see the next copy for approval, and then they do. So, and this is, I may be wrong, I think I may have it as an approval item, but
On the front, and that's why I saw draft and
It's, our goal here is to get feedback as much as possible and to make sure. I believe the board is approving it in December, so it should have been an information or discussion item for today's agenda.
You can bring it back one more time.
Yeah.
For review with the cabinet, yeah.
Is that something you can set it out?
Yes.
I know that as I get towards the end of November, I think I expired. But I'd like to see
End of November, so you have to be here in November. You don't get to go away until December. We don't want you gone.
Yay!
One more
I
month.
just, what I'd like to do is I would like to see it when it's got a little bit more refined, it's gonna seem a little bit fuzzy. And, I'm all big on measurable goals, so that's great. I don't know that I would want to make too many comments now until I see what you guys are doing.
Anybody opposed to that observation?
Not opposed.
Not opposed,
Just a
okay. But
comment.
you are, okay.
It's always nice when you redrew an article like a draft, that you show the changes and whether you use one color text and the other color text, so that way you see what the difference is. Otherwise, you have no idea what's been changed. It's always a good way to do that.
I made some very serious structural changes, so everything would be red, and it would be very hard to read. From this point, I will happily do that with any edits I receive from here. This is just kind of a reformatting of what you have seen before.
Why don't you just, can you just kind of skim through it and show us what the new look like is? And-
So major changes is we pulled out the 2019 goals and activities and separated that from the program descriptions. And the reason for that is they were so interchanged that people who were just looking for what are you doing couldn't find it. And we wanted to address that concern. The second thing that we did make as a pretty large change is each of these sections has now got a strategic plan priorities section. They have not yet been filled in. I am hoping to send it to you with those filled in, but I don't have it yet. Where each program is going to say their highest focus relating to the strategic plan for 2019 is insert the blank. Each of these sections does have, as they have always had, our activities and goals. It talks about what the activities are, grant access information, ombudsman program. At the bottom of that, it does have, most of them, also have a key measures section that talk about what you will be able to look back on and see whether we were accomplishing our goals or not. The environmental planning program is one that has a whole lot more changes coming, so I've just marked it as start from blank. That's why it's all highlighted right now. Again, switching that so it's activities and goals as what you see at the beginning rather than the pages and pages of program description seemed like it would be something that helped make it flow better for people who already know what we do. So again, activities and goals, key measures, and then on to the next. Within those, these strategic plan priority sections are pulled out so that as you come up on something that this section should be addressing a strategic plan priority, we're going to call them out. And then it provides all of the same, what are our programs, what's the description, how are they organized, that was in this original one is still in there, it's just in the back now. So that's the big formatting change we did. We are going to be working with all of the program managers to hopefully call out as clearly as possible the 2019 goals and activities. We want them to be something that are clear and understandable.
Well, I would say I especially appreciate linking it back to the strategic plan that we looked at, because that's an important continuity piece. So thank you for doing that. Jen?
I'm just,
Microphone, please.
I'm just curious, from a management perspective, whether they thought about, the nice thing about having is it, have you looked at all these programs and changed the weight or the budget of any of them? Or are you looking at that to probably reemphasize or de-emphasize some different areas? Because, times change, and sometimes it's easy to go, okay, we're gonna increase the budget 3%, and we're gonna do, 10% more or 10% less, that kind of stuff. But it doesn't really address some of the hard questions sometimes. I'm just curious if you've had any thoughts.
Great question, and I think we've had a lot of thought around it, and a few changes, a few increases in the budget, and we should mention that as well. We put a draft budget in front of the board earlier this month, and they kind of preempted us and they adopted it. We thought we'd take another month or so and bring it back for a final draft next month, but they loved everything they saw. They actually went ahead and adopted the budget, so which is fine. If we need to make additional changes next year with an amendment or what have you, we can certainly do that. But yes, we're looking at where our resources need to be, what's coming out of the strategic plan, and how to weave that into the work plan. So we've increased our budget a little bit in transportation, and we'd like to increase it in a couple of other areas, maybe in AAA. And maybe one thing that might help, if I can take 60 seconds and just identify kind of the top 7 things that I've identified that we're going to weave into the work plan that come out of the strategic plan that you'll see in the draft for next month. And this kind of gets to some of the resource increases. One is we're going to adopt next year our 2045 long-range transportation plan, as you all know. It's a big deal, going through a major community involvement effort, and that's a big deal for us as a region. We've got a lot of other things related to that are going to start happening next year. We're doing a smart cities, technology, transportation forum sometime in early 2019. You'll hear a lot more about that. So some of these have some resource implications, but some of this stuff we can do within our existing budget resources. But that's one big thing. Second big project, we're looking at ways to plan for transportation needs, or at least identify priorities, or help the local communities identify priorities outside of the urbanized area. And we've identified, I think we set aside up to $200,000 as a placeholder in the budget and in the work plan to start doing that next year in 2019. Basically what that means is that we spend a lot of time in urbanized El Paso County and the city and our surrounding immediate jurisdictions, but we don't do as much transportation planning support in Teller County, Park County. They've got a great relationship. We all have a really good relationship with CDOT, but they're looking at kind of the statewide system, and they don't get down below the level of the state system for county roads and other transportation needs. So we're going to help start doing that next year if we can line up the money for it. We've got some ideas as far as how we can make that happen, but that's the second big priority. Third one is information sharing, and we're going to start spending some more time and probably some more resources, financial and staff resources, in coordinating things like GIS data sharing. We develop a lot of information for the models that we run. We run a land use model and a travel model that goes into our transportation planning process. So we see a lot of the data that we collect there that can meet a lot of other needs there as well with all of our local jurisdictions and other partners like the Chamber and EDC and other folks. That's a third big priority. Fourth is, and Hal has been involved with this, and Ann as well, our Water Quality Management Committee is going to adopt a water quality management plan for the region as a whole. We've last updated that in, I want to say 2010, so the fact that we're going to have a new transportation plan next year and a new water quality management plan at the same time for the region. There's some synergy there, so that's kind of a big deal. It doesn't have a real big resource implication, but that's a big initiative for next year. The fifth one is joint land use study. We're going to wrap that up by the end of this year and start with implementation in 2019. That has resource implications. We're looking for grants and other funds to help drive that effort, so that's going to be a big focus. Sixth is AAA. We're looking for ways we can expand our AAA public awareness, if you will, and that's going to require some additional resources. Maybe there's nonprofit foundation-type grants we can go after to be able to start doing some advertising to let people know about all the good services we provide in the AAA. So we're going to dive into that next year as well. And finally is advocacy and coming up with a clear set of legislative priorities at the state and federal level, and that's what Jessica's going to be kind of leading us in as well. Something we've talked a lot about in the past. We've been a little bit reactionary, but we think we can be a little bit more proactive on the legislative front. So those are, when I look at the work plan, the strategic plan, and everything else going on, those are kind of the top priorities that I see that will reflect in the plan going forward. Okay, appreciate it.
Sort of related to that, is it typical for an MPO for nearly 90% of their budget to come from grants? Because I imagine that the confines of those grants sort of restrict your flexibility in terms of prioritization.
We are restricted, and yes, I think we're probably a little bit heavy on the grant side, but having 80 to 90% come from federal and state grants, that's not that unusual. Since we serve as a transportation planning function within the MPO area, for the three-county region, as a AAA, we get funds from the Older Americans Act, so that does dictate a lot of what we're going to do already. Yeah.
Do you have it in your work plan to look for some sort of non-traditional or different pots of funding to free that up a little bit?
Yeah, and that's sort of what I was alluding to with the AAA for sure. Well, a couple of areas. AAA transportation for doing planning outside the urbanized area. AAA so we can start advertising because we can't use our federal grants that we get through the Older Americans Act to do advertising. We can raise awareness and do some education, but we can't really overtly advertise that we have, Medicare assistance here as you're signing up for open enrollment, for instance, things like that. So if we had a separate entity that we could create as a nonprofit and go after grants and foundation funds that we can't as a quasi-public entity, that'll maybe bring in some additional resources as well. We know there's some foundation money out there already. If we were set up properly, we could go after those funds. So look at expanding our financial resources that way. And the joint land use study as well. We've been lucky with the OEA grants we've gotten through Department of Defense for the past 3 years, and we're looking at some other ways to maybe augment that with other funds, non-federal funds, to continue the joint land use study. Yeah, so great question.
Julie?
Thanks. One thing I was dismayed about was that an environmental planner has essentially been cut in half. And it seems to me that water quality, air quality, you talk about being proactive, it seems like that might be a really good person. I could see where it would touch on just about everything except maybe the area for agency or aging. The smart cities too, and with regulations seem to be changing on the federal level, just having someone who understands that kind of thing. And Jessica gave me just a little bit of information on that, but is that something you might see in the future bringing back to full-time?
It is coming back. May not be full-time. We got approval in our budget earlier this month to hire at least a part-time position, 30 hours a week. Might be able to grow that a little bit, but it definitely, for a number of reasons, we've kind of pulled out of the environmental planning support arena, but we need to be actively involved, whether it's the Water Quality Management Committee, as we're updating this water quality plan, as I mentioned. We're getting our Air Quality Technical Committee back together. It's been a little bit dormant now for a couple of years, and we've got some air quality issues on the horizon that we need to get more proactive with. Even though we're not in nonconformity, we just need to be proactive to educate the public as to why we should drive less and reduce emissions and things like that. And a whole host of other environmental-related issues, whether it's stormwater, the impacts related to forest fires that we have, or a bunch of other initiatives that are happening in the region. I think we can provide some support without duplicating efforts, so it's coming back in 2019, so we're excited about that. I appreciate hearing your comments and may need to pick your brain a little bit more.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
If I understand what we've been hearing for the last 20 minutes is basically we don't have anything that really reflects what we need to be approving, correct? Or
Correct.
recommending approval.
I will email to you all the draft that goes to the Board of Directors, which again will be different than the draft you saw,
Okay.
so that you may give me comments. But again, they are seeing a draft that is for information and discussion only. They will not be being asked to act on it. I know I've got it right on their agenda, even if I've got it wrong on ours. The budget was approved. It was presented to them as a draft, and they jumped straight ahead and approved it.
Yeah, I was in the room, and I think I was probably as surprised as staff was when they approved the draft budget.
We all
Okay.
gave a face.
Well, let me, if I could, on behalf of our absent leader, recommend that you watch for that, and as soon as you've got that you please take some time to go over it and see if there's some concerns that you have or suggestions that you can get back to Jessica so it can flow into the conversation. Okay? All right. We will not take any further action on that. Item D.
So, Jessica with the Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments, going to hand it on over to your vice chair and the chair of your nominating committee.
We never did formally say I was the chair of it, but I do want to express appreciation to Hal and to Terry, who were tireless in their efforts to pull this thing off. The volunteers that we received are as you see it. I will say that the three of us all agreed that this is an excellent group of folks, a good place for us to be. And although we're a little early in the process, I think we could accept a motion to approve these as the officers for 2019. Comments or concerns or questions?
I will add one comment. The reason you are seeing this now instead of in a month is because your nominations committee and your volunteers got back to us much faster than they have historically. Isn't that a really gentle way to say it, guys?
Which probably means they didn't vet everybody really.
We've been watching you, Tim. We've been watching you. Could I have a motion to adopt this group as our officers for 2019? It's Sharon Brown as the chair, Tim O'Donnell as the first vice chair, and Courtney as the second vice chair. Yes.
Ellen Hasse, I so move.
Okay, we have a motion to approve.
Second, Juliet.
Second from Juliet. Any discussion, comments, questions?
May the nominating committee vote.
I don't see why not. It's been done in the past.
Just asking.
Yeah. Okay, I mean, the chair of last year's nominating committee wasn't present when the vote took place. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much, and we look forward to an exciting year with your leadership.
About that.
We'll see what happens. Okay, so we are actually well ahead of our normal schedule. There is a long-range transportation plan schedule update. Hi. I haven't seen you in the longest time. Now, before Jennifer gets started, would you all like to take like a 3-minute break here, just to stretch or wiggle your toes or get a coffee or something?
This is only going to take 3 minutes.
Oh, it will?
Yeah.
Okay, well, you can stand if you'd like.
Thank you.
That's fine. No, I understand. I get seat weary myself. Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Jennifer Valentine, I'm a transportation planner with PPACG. So I really just wanted to provide a quick update on the schedule. You know, we develop our schedule and methodology and framework at the very beginning of the process, and as we go along, sometimes little things change. So basically what we did was just a couple of housekeeping items, adjusted some things on the schedule that have already happened, and added some detail to the next year and a half of the schedule. So the main things I wanted to point out were a couple of things we're excited about. So one is we're planning a transportation technology peer exchange for early next year, and the idea is to bring together some experts in the field to talk about things like drones and those truck platoons we're hearing about, and just different types of technologies, and really getting our board members, our committee members, and some other stakeholders in the region to talk about how they think transportation technology is going to impact our future. So it's really just that. It's just a peer exchange, and hopefully it will inform our chapter in the long-range plan on that topic. So you'll be hearing more about that as we firm up speakers and dates, but you'll definitely all be invited. So probably towards the end of January of next year. The other piece is kind of the next main push we have after we finish scoring projects and drawing lines and figuring out how much money we have, is doing our environmental justice analysis. So that's an analysis of how the package of projects that we end up choosing for the long-range plan impact so-called disadvantaged communities. So we typically look at different minority groups, low-income groups, and we've also traditionally looked at seniors as well. So we're going to be doing a little bit more with that than we've done in previous plan cycles. We're going to be looking at a lot of different accessibility measures, so access to schools and parks and hospitals and full-service grocery stores, things like that. So we've already been talking with Mountain Metro Transit and El Paso County Public Health to try and piggyback on some of the work that they've already been doing
in those areas. So the only other piece I wanted to point out was we did extend the review time and made our last open house earlier in the process because we wanted to make sure we had plenty of time to incorporate any feedback or comments that we've heard. We didn't want to, sneak that in at the very end in case there is something important we hear during that process.
Any questions for Jennifer? Any general comments?
Sounds good.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
It's nice to see you.
You too.
Okay. Member announcements. Tim?
I've got a couple things. Both on the Kono board as well as the bid board, so I've got two different things. Kono was involved from a facilitating and consulting position with the city for the short-term rental legislation that just passed. So if you're not familiar with that, it will take place in Colorado Springs, the city of Colorado Springs, we'll go outside of that. And it starts in January. There will be licenses that have to be renewed every year. So if you have a short-term rental, it's basically aligned with the R codes, the residential codes. If you're in R1 area, you can only have one bedroom, one house, one whatever as a rental. And if you're in R2 area, then you can have multiple ones. There are some limitations. There are no caps for the numbers citywide simply because we don't know. Someone's going to be involved in the measuring and evaluating how the bill's doing. We'll be back with City Council later next year to decide if we need to tweak the bill at all. So there's that part of it. And then the bid board, the skate park things, if you didn't buy Acacia Park, they're already setting that up, so that'll be mid-November through, I think they're gonna try to push it out to almost April, March sometime. There's gonna be a lot longer time period there. So that's gonna be a big deal. They'll be doing all the lights downtown, those kind of things. So, but the biggest thing is this short-term rental legislation. So if you have any questions about it, I have copies of what passed, and I can kind of tell you where, what was decided on.
I understand it was mitigated from the original proposal.
Yes, yeah, there were a lot of changes made because we did public forums and we got a lot of input from people that had STRs. And quite frankly, they all voted for it. It was a unanimous thing by city council after a working session where it was split 4-4. But meeting, most of the people supported it. Even the ones with short-term rental supported it because they recognized the need for some kind of regulation for safety and to make sure things didn't get out of hand.
Okay, thank you. Hal?
Yeah, hopefully everyone in this room is aware that starting tomorrow, there's a major countywide, almost BPACG-wide fundraising event, the Indie Give campaign. Kicks off tomorrow. There's a Black Lager event at Bristol Pub, which is kind of the kickoff. Every time you buy a beer, you end up giving money to Give. Give raised last year $1.7 million, something like that, Courtney, and it was split among 75 nonprofits. This year, I think it's 90 nonprofits, and of course the goal is a little bit higher. But there's actually two great nonprofits represented in Give this year that are associated with people in this room. One is the Independence Center at Courtney, which does great work for those that are disadvantaged and need a hand up. And also HERES, which is one of the nonprofits that I'm involved with. And this is the first year HERES is in the program. So I urge you, when you have the opportunity, either promote it among friends and family, or if you're a giver, it's all done online. It lasts until the 31st of December. And those are two great nonprofits, along with all the others. But I urge as much support in the community as possible. This is all local. 100% local charity, 100% local money. It all stays local.
And you said that starts tomorrow? Okay.
Yeah, Cono's first year.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Forgive me. No, it's at Ivy Wild down at the old school building.
Yeah, they're
at the
introducing
Bristol Brewery.
Bristol Brewery's introducing a dark brew.
Yeah, it's called the Black Water.
Black Water.
Oh, that'd be good. It's probably an offset to 1554 from up in Fort Collins.
It is specifically for DIV. It actually raises money for DIV for 2 months. I think they give all the proceeds for. Wow. So there's an awful lot of support. You'll see it in the Independent. You'll see it in the Gazette. It's online at indiegive.com or on Facebook at indiegive. You just type those in.
Yeah.
Give has an exclamation mark. So, great program. 100% local.
Okay. Any other comments or announcements?
If anybody wants any information on HERES, I have some.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So thank you guys very much. I have an update from CDOT on the I-25 gap. They wanted to just let us know that they're working hard, but as always, they're not without issues, and so they won't be able to come and speak directly to us. So they just sent us an email update. Package 1 is already under construction, and Package 2 is in final design. November is when they are planning to do pricing negotiations and final clearances, with contracting scheduled for December. That would provide for all the major work on Package 2, which is the monument side of it, begin in January.
And I think there's still a funding issue on the middle.
Yeah.
Is the Package 2 starts in January?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to overlap them?
Well, the Package 1 is the north end.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
They aren't done with that, right?
No.
No. Not even, yeah.
It's separating the lanes and all kinds of fun stuff.
This comes under the heading, be careful what you wish for, I think.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or
well,
take
I'll-
83.
Everybody else bring it in. Line in the spring. You aren't getting here from Denver.
83 is going to be very busy for a while.
I think so.
Yes, yes.
That's,
Okay.
they're actually starting to, kind of wait until the other one's done. Oh, Lord.
Don't be shy about asking your western region neighbors about alternative routes through the mountains to get from here to Denver. So it's such a pleasant way to travel if you've got a vehicle.
And that's from the Teller County Chamber of Commerce.
And on that note, one of the strategic plan items that was approved is information sharing. One of our big tools for that is you, our Community Advisory Committee. You are the ones who can tell the board what issues you're seeing in the community and what issues you are hearing from each other are running across those community boundaries. What things are you hearing about where someone says, they told me they couldn't deal with it because it's out of their realm, or because they have to work with so-and-so. As you run into those things, we will have an item on the regular board agenda for information sharing. For example, one of the things that's on there for the November board meeting is the City of Colorado Springs has the draft of their homeless action plan up for review. We're sharing that with the board. That way they've got the chance, because homelessness is a region-wide issue. When those kind of things cross your path, do you think it's something that our entire region might be interested in, or is something you think maybe the CAC should bring up? Come on, guys, talk to me. You like me.
Well, on kind of on that note, I'd like to reiterate something we discussed a year ago or a little longer ago, and that is, I'll frame it this way. Most of us read fairly widely, I would assume, in areas that either we're directly interested in because we are representing the county or whatever, or because we are interested in that particular area. But the board has reiterated an interest in us bringing forward kind of blue sky stuff, something that we've seen that might be something just over the horizon that we need to be thinking about. It's not necessarily a hot issue that needs to be addressed immediately, but it could be something, autonomous cars or the increasing technology in cars that allows them to talk to each other and space appropriately and things like that. that has some implications for transportation planning, road requirements, things like that. That's all kind of blue sky sort of stuff that is worth us discussing. We bring a particular perspective, and our perspective is valued at the board, so.
Our chair, Norm Steen, actually talked to Jim about this at our last meeting and said, hey, I remember you guys talking about doing blue sky stuff. Much nicer than I did.
Julie?
I'll go really blue sky for you. Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change came back with a report, 2040. We have 12 years to change the world. So I'd be curious what their plans are for dealing with climate change locally and how they're planning to address the problems that contribute to it locally. So maybe those autonomous cars can all be electric.
Send me the link and I'll put it in their information package.
Yeah. Okay.
14. We all.
The atmosphere will collapse completely. Either that or. Yeah,
I think it's the tipping point for how much the temperature of the planet has, can we back out of it? And it's not looking good.
Let's be careful about that debate. Tim?
Would parking problems be
Oh, yeah.
blue sky thing?
Mm-hmm.
Because they're putting up a lot of apartment buildings. I get notified almost weekly now with more and more hotels or apartment buildings going up, especially on what they call the New South End.
Yeah, yeah.
And even with Colorado College ice arena, there's no way to do that.
Is that a county planning, or is that a city planning issue? City?
Yeah.
I wonder if maybe we ought to invite somebody to come in and talk. I like that idea. Yes, sir.
Ryan,
Pardon?
Ryan.
One of the observations, I get a lot of feedback because we have a weekly meeting of various groups of people, and we have a speaker every week. And one of the speakers came in, and it's difficult for us for me to bring it to this group because it's a Colorado Springs issue.
Mm-hmm.
But the activities going on around Colorado College are really causing some heartburn because of the way that it's being handled by Colorado College and the city. They say they're asking for feedback, but it doesn't matter what feedback you give. They make decisions before they receive the feedback, but hold the meeting anyway. And there's a lot of individual people. Now it's one house, 2 or 5 houses, where they think they're going to have to put a parking lot. Or they don't have any plans for a parking lot, but they're going to have 1,500 people down in the center of town 3 or 4 times a month. And they don't have any understanding of this.
And
So
where this is going to impact us is it pushes traffic to I-25. Because people won't go on Nevada, or they won't go on Tejon anymore because
it's one lane.
one lane.
So those are issues that tend to be city-oriented.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, our scope is, or should be, region-wide, per se. But that's a lot of the feedback that I get, is issues in the city. And I don't bring them to this group because it's not our opinion. However, if you recall, a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, we had some very interesting discussions about our role.
Yes.
And I think we've gotten past those specific issues of like rubber stamping items. But we still spend too much time having input on transportation. And while we listen and we get information on the other activities going on, we don't have any role in those. I think that's a challenge for us. I think it's a positive opportunity.
Well, it's an observation, and Jessica, you may have an insight on this, but it seems to me that what we're dealing with is where the balance of resources is within the staff. And so, the squeaky wheel's going to get the attention. And I think there's a significant number of transportation planners who work those kinds of things, and not so much, we don't get a lot of input on like aging, which is another big function but we just are not talking about some of that stuff. And I just heard that the Area Agency on Aging is going to get some attention in the coming year. So I think those are important things.
Well, and they're getting more money, which is a big,
Yes.
big piece.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, we tend to get information sporadically, but we really aren't asked to do anything.
Mhm.
I think maybe being proactive on some of those
Okay.
might be an opportunity.
All right. Ann?
I might just chime in. I represent Green Mountain Falls on the Pikes Peak Rural Transportation Authority, which I've mentioned before, and it stops at Cristola Inn. You know, it stops at the county line of El Paso and Teller. And then, you know, then it's all of El Paso, and Rama had joined in, you know, with roads and the mountain roads, as wonderful as Ellen is to invite everybody to come up, of course, there's a lot of traffic and a lot of problems with watershed activity, and Hal and I do that. I don't really know. You're all engineers. I'm not, but I go to the meetings, and
The best questions come from people that are really details.
well, you know, just, I know that Andy would like to try to not have so many bits and pieces that keep our staff so busy coming to meetings, even to write reports and that overlap, and they need to do it. I don't mean that. I appreciate what they do, but I don't even know what I'm saying, except that with the water and traffic out of the mountains. And then we talked about, well, in the water thing, we talked about the development of the properties out on the plains that were ranches. One well served that ranch really well, but my gosh, then you build 500 houses on it. What do you do about the water? Those are just, with our population explosion, as you all know better than I. So I'm just, you know, being a mountain person like Ellen, we see that perspective. And then Sharon, you're from Fountain. So I don't know. I just think it's a very exciting time that everybody's brainstorming. And I don't know. I just thank you for saying all that, Hal. I'm just voicing what you said.
Well, we're giving the incoming chair things to mull over.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sharon, you can.
Okay, any other announcements? Oh, yes. John?
I did not move to Woodland Park if it would have been in the middle of somewhere between Craig and somewhere else, okay? Colorado Springs is the hub for all of us. It just is. And all of this gorgeous development that's going on, and you see it as you drive around, has to be tempered or measured with long-range planning, just like we talked about at some of these meetings. They want to build a complex here that you've got enough in your database to be able to say this is what the parking needs, this is what the traffic is going to become so many years from now. I think that's already here. And what I'm saying is somebody's got to coordinate all this. If they need 1,500 parking spaces somewhere in that area, somebody's got to be saying you can build it if you put in 1,500 parking spaces. That kind of coordination has to be done with growth. And if you control the growth in a good, positive way, this will be a great, great place. It'll be a world-class city to come to. But that has to be all coordinated with all the different departments. And that's what Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments. We get together and we share that stuff. And we've got to do those type of things and let it continue. So be it.
All right. And do I have an amen on that? Tamara?
Yeah, I had a question, and so I don't think this is a problem that we can solve, but with PPACG, we have the transportation, we have all that, and we also have the aging agency.
Right.
With technology advancing as quickly as it is, with transportation, you know, access to Wi-Fi, soon Vermeil Street will have Wi-Fi on the streets. So you can drive down there, you can sit, and you just have Wi-Fi on the street. There's so much technology, and it can't help tying that into our aging communities. I feel like if there's, the lady spoke of the services, I think it's great that they're reaching more people and serving more people, but at the same time, is that a measurement of success, or should the agency's goal to be serving less people because you're enabling more people to not need the agency? And I think that's kind of a hard thing to gauge. But to me, if we can educate and make technology easily used by all age groups, then I think it enables all age groups to help themselves. For example, we talk about transportation for the aging community. If we can teach those who need that transportation how to use the Uber app and give discounts on the Uber app so that the city is not having to front the bills for the buses. And so now you've just enabled those folks, people with disabilities or aging, to just do it on their own time and when they need it, versus a schedule that's trying to meet a very large group of people, a big community. It's hard. It's so many factors, like John, you just said. But to me, it should get easier for us to all work together so that we can serve all parts of our community with all the technology that's coming. It's a lot to handle, and I'm wondering if there's anyone that's looking at the huge picture, the very, very big picture of what we can actually do so that Colorado Springs can be a high-tech community that values, as we have valued, the aging, retiring community that have served our country in the military, as well as people who are disabled. And I just feel like there's so much opportunity with the technology, and I'm only on the transportation side, so I only see the exciting part of the transportation. But I also know transportation is key to all of our lives because we all need transportation to get to the places. And if we can make that easier for everyone, I just think that would be the goal we should have so that we can enable everyone. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that would be the exciting. That's blue, like skies out Mars kind of concept thinking. I think we're all getting there. I see everyone doing a little bit, but it would be so exciting if a group of people saw all of that and said, hey, we have this piece, this piece, this piece, and this piece. How can we make a big picture so that when we do one thing, it benefits everybody? I mean, that would be exciting. Sorry, I get really passionate about it.
Jennifer.
So, CDATG coordinates with Mountain Metro Transit each sponsored plan cycle to do an update of their transit plan and specialized transportation plan. And I believe right now the RFP is still out, seeking a consulting firm to do those plans. Staff here at CDATG, the neighbors we met with a consultant who, one of the guys actually did the last plan. They're interested in doing this one. And we had a long conversation about what you just talked about, the Uber-related issue. How could that be more cost-effective in providing specialized transportation services as we currently do with the kind of on-call or on-demand? So people are thinking about that, and hopefully that's going to be a bigger component of the specialized transportation plan than it was last time.
And also the healthcare system is going more towards electronic and digital, so people don't have to leave their home to be able to.
They can have their heart too.
Right.
Mhm.
That's amazing. Care about it. Can you imagine if you can talk to a doctor without having to leave your home? Now you just do the requirement for transporting, folks to the hospitals or doctor's office. There's so much technology going everywhere. I don't know. It's just kind of mind blowing, but exciting.
Like,
New officers to bring this forward.
message from John. Yeah. Message from John, well received. Ellen, we're going to need to wrap this up a little bit today.
Got grandkids
I
I can
just-
go see.
I just wanted to say, Tamara, once again, you've taken us into the future, and I really appreciate your view. What what we're talking about is all the different aspects of the community that are actually arms on the umbrella, but who's shaping the umbrella and making sure the connectivity is there, so that as we step into the future, we have these opportunities. We're not trying to fit it in real time or work to correct errors made in past because we weren't thoughtful enough in the planning. That's what it's about, and this is a great place to have those conversations and for us to forward topics, as Jessica just said, forward to the board for consideration. I would just jump back into what Julie said earlier to tie all this together and say, I think we all want it. I think the community at large very much needs it, and the quality of the community that we shape by being thoughtful and having these conversations and doing the research and shaping this going forward is exactly what we all want. But if we don't have the quality of the air, if we don't have the quality in the water, if we're not thoughtful about how we're going to maintain that while we're increasing the population and changing the shape and the interactions in the community, we're not going to end up with what John said, which is a world-class community where everyone wants to be. We're so close already. We're internationally recognized and have been for generations. We want to maintain that and go higher yet, but the water and the air quality are key, as is all the connectivity with the transportation, et cetera, et cetera. We're right on the cusp, and we're very much tied into all of the different entities that have to interconnect. The average citizen is counting on us, not thinking about how we do it at all, but just assuming that somehow it's going to happen. I love what Tamara said about the technology and how technology can take that road trip out of the day for N number of people as we step forward and actually make the quality of life higher for all of us who are using the various aspects of the community. So it's a beautiful picture we just wove here, sitting together and chatting. I want to thank you all for contributing to that, but let's do just that. Let's continue to bring the information forward, share the blue sky with the board, and ask them to host more conversations and maybe even more workshops. We got a lot of work to do to get to the community John has described. It's great now. We want to make it better, and my thanks to you all.
Thank you. I'm going to say, does anybody have anything else? Okay. That was an excellent conversation, and I don't know how we can try to build that in going forward. We'll see.
Why don't we talk about it?
Not tonight.
Yeah, now it's next meeting.
Yeah, next meeting.
Regarding the calendar, Mr.
Yes.
Chair, I see that we have a meeting set for November the 28th. Did you want to entertain today any discussion of the December schedule? Or
We
do you
already,
wanna wait?
we had that
Sorry,
discussion last month.
Yeah.
And the meeting has been moved up to 19th of December.
We thank you.
You're welcome. I have our strategic plan being revisited. I have possibly the cost overrun, 30th Street, will be coming back to us. Is there anything else that you heard that we need to bring forward for next month? Julie?
Just the census was mentioned in the work plan, and I would be curious what the Teller and El Paso counties are doing to reach out and get everybody counted. It's a big deal. And on the water quality and air quality note, just to follow up, I think Andy mentioned some things on the horizon, so maybe we can get some updates in the next few months. It's not necessarily next month, but it would be interesting to hear from the committee that Hal's on and Ann attends, and know what's going on with air quality.
Good.
Thanks.
John?
Fraser talked about the lift station that's taking place on 25. That sounds to me like it's a major single-family residence development just north of Winnicott, and I have not heard about that. Is that something on the horizon?
Was it Squirrel Creek?
Yeah.
Squirrel Hill.
Squirrel Hill. I think there was two separate developments.
Something, you call it the farm?
Yeah, farm, something.
Oh, that's only one of
Creek, sorry.
Several,
Yeah.
there's several.
Yeah, that's an area that's filling in between,
If you go out east, it's quite unbelievable.
It is.
Quite unbelievable.
If you fly into Colorado Springs, the rooftops out in areas where there was nothing 10 years ago is amazing. Okay.
I do think it'd be interesting, and then I have to go, so maybe you too.
Yeah,
I think it's
audition.
interesting to get somebody to come in and give us another update of water supply.
Yes.
We've had that in the past.
Okay.
That's to this issue. There are some great novels, I happen to be a science fiction aficionado, and great novels for 20, 30, 40 years in the future where Texas is at war because they don't have any water, and Arizona is keeping people out because they get Colorado water.
It's the
It's interesting that
classic struggle.
talk about supply.
Well, the history of the West
Oh, yes.
is the history of water, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I think that's a good idea. I also think that in line with kind of what Tamara was talking about, we might want to pulse into UCCS and see if there are any thinkers up there in the technology area that are looking out at implications going forward. Okay. John?
Woodland Park, even though we're small, has a water tap management system. And I've been involved with that for years.
Mhm.
And we could even have people come in and talk, okay, let's go to the connection system. We know we're tapped out at 13,000
Yep.
people, population period. And we gear towards that. And we've managed taps. We used to have them on back in the
Good.
early 90s. There was actually a drawing, how many houses we installed. I'm assuming the springs, we're very careful about not getting us in a situation where we can't afford the water to share that we got to buy.
Yep.
Because they're so expensive. And I'm assuming Colorado Springs maybe is doing the same thing on the whole overall water.
We might, that might be a topic that could be a multi-presentation kind of thing over a period of time, simply because I'm not sure, I know the Southern Delivery System was predicated on a strategic plan over X number of years, and I think what we're seeing right now is that we're growing faster than that plan anticipated. So what the implications are there.
I would like to suggest a presentation in the foreseeable future on that topic, because actually, when you sit here, the water supply coming out of the homestay, so that supports Woodland Park, also supports Green Mountain Falls and all the rest of the Pikes Peak region. We're interconnected in ways we're not even aware of, most of us on a day-to-day basis. It might be useful to have an update on that.
Okay.
One of the process of putting a new reservoir in our town up on the ridge up there to be able to have the additional water.
Okay. Well, we're losing people. So you have the meeting schedule. Our next meeting is the 28th of November. Thank you all very much. Hopefully we'll have Michelle back then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jen? I think she said she had to come back next month, because she doesn't actually formally end until the end of November.
Jen?
Who is that? Jen?
My thanks to you all.
Here's your
Next meeting.